It's the last one, TOK essay title number 6. I've broken them all down before anybody else. Let's get an A and
get an A in TOK.
Like all my other videos, the reason you're here, it's not for me, it's to get my notes wherever you can see them here. I don't know. So what you want to do if you haven't seen my other videos is pause the video, jump down into the description, and grab the notes that you see here. Okay? Go ahead, pause it. It's okay. No, really. Like, pause it now. Okay, now follow along with me in this document. The first thing, if you need extra help, and if it's February, you know that you do, you can click here and you'll go to my Fiverr store. I tutor people from all around the world. You can send me your essay, we can Zoom. I can even make a video just for you. If you didn't believe that I Zoom with people all around the world, my world domination is at 45%. Look at all the people who I work with. And check out my 5-star reviews, Yakult lover in Singapore, somebody in the UK, someone in Palestine. That's so cool. So if you need help, I am here to help you way more than the other guys whose name we don't mention. Next, something super cool on my Substack, I am writing essays. I'm giving you samples for every single one. I'm releasing at least one every single week. Now check here, I love this. All of these people are subscribing to me on Substack. I didn't even ask you to, but you're following me, that's great. Jahangir asked, can you do one of title number 4? Yes, I will, just for you, and I'll tag you in it. And then finally, as always, if you need extra downloads, extra notes, go to getana.tok.com/free stuff. I've got what you need. Number 6 is the basic one, also number 1, super basic. Guarantee you 1 and 6 will be the most popular. It's usually the case that 2 make up the vast majority of TOK essay titles. To what extent is interpretation a reliable tool in the production of knowledge? Answer with reference to history. Interesting that we're requiring history, and one other A-OK. Okay, choose this if you don't want to choose title number 1. So if a lot of your people at school are doing title number 1, go ahead and choose this one. They're both easy. Do this if you want to choose to do history correctly. I'm going to show you how to do that. And then you can also choose this for any A-OK. I have ones that I suggest here, but you can really use any A-OK. Yeah, they'll all work here. A couple of important tips. It's always advantageous to talk about ways of knowing, or WOKs, in TOK assignments. Doesn't matter what it is, if it's a formative, if it's this actual thing, talk about WOKs. They are not a core part of the curriculum anymore, but that doesn't mean that we've stopped using language or stopped using imagination. So you can always talk about these. You might not even call them ways of knowing. You could just refer to these as tools, just like interpretation. So as you see here, interpretation is not one of these. And I kind of like this because what the IB is doing is saying we are being very liberal in what we consider a tool for knowledge production. These are the classic ones here, but now they're saying interpretation, which really would be a mixture of sense perception and reason. Interpretation is one of these tools. Now, I said we want to study history correctly. If you listen to nothing else, listen to this. This is from the May 2024 subject report saying, here's what people are doing wrong. What do we do wrong? Studying the AOK of history is to study works of historians in the production of knowledge of the past, instead of merely referring to the past events, but not associating them with the work involved in coming to know or understand the event. So if you choose this title, you do not talk about things that happened in the past. That is just stuff. That's not the AOK of history. The AOK of history is what did historians do to learn about those things. Totally different, and so many people blow it. And last year, so many people blew it that they had to put it in the subject report. Okay, we got that out of the way. Let's jump into the examples. Okay, history. Interpretation is as reliable as the source is. A really interesting thing that can connect with the to what extent, because this is a to what extent, so we can go agree or disagree. We've already looked at the outlines in my title breakdown video. Please take a look at that one. But this would be to what extent is as reliable as the source is. So one way of looking at reliability of the source is to look at how historians interpret what it means to be reliable. So you can break down this word, you can deconstruct this word. So this article by Marino demonstrates that there are many variables and aspects of how a source might be interpreted to be reliable, unreliable, or trustworthy. So how can we know if interpretation is reliable? because we're connecting it to the source so that we can understand, is my interpretation correct with how the truth is connected to the source. Really interesting. In this case, interpretation is based on many variables related to the text. Specifically in this document, read those pages. It's not like 500 pages. It's from a textbook. So go ahead and check that out. As you can see, I love this example here. This is like the longest evidence I've ever given. Similar to examples given about the human sciences, studying people who just lie when they're being studied. Unwitting testimony is when historians can learn about a source from what isn't what they said. Instead, historians interpret the meaning of words and more to understand biases, different angles, different perspectives, language, and missing information that may reveal more about the writer than what is actually discovered. I'm not going to say discovered, I'm going to say what is actually written or spoken. So this is a big connection to history because we're not looking at what is literally recorded by the historical source. We're looking at what is implied by that and how they said it, when they said it, what they didn't say. So Marwick's The Fundamentals of History gives good examples of how to approach this AOK, and section 8 in this document right here shows how unwitting testimony works. So I was reading this and I just go un-w, and then we see this whole thing right here. This is really helpful. This is not an example that you would cite and quote, but this is going to help you understand it and help with your analysis. Looking at how this has actually been studied, this study by somebody I can't pronounce explores if studied slaves told interviewers just what they had to say. So he's interviewing slaves, or somebody interviewed slaves, and they're thinking, this language, these things that the slaves are saying, is this actually true? That's unwitting testimony. The Holocaust Encyclopedia shows how the interviews of Holocaust survivors in Poland taught us about more than just what they spoke about. It taught us about culture, humanity, and the interconnectedness of survivors. So they might not have said, I love this person, but in how they spoke about certain people, we understood the entire communal aspect of people hiding. When they shared jokes and songs, for example, as Time magazine writes in this article, we are learning about more than lyrics. Can interpretation go too far? Yes, it can. When it comes to infamous interpretations, Holocaust deniers are the most hated. Are they demonstrating their biases, or just interpreting things differently? The legal situation of David Irving, and there is so much about this. So here is one study that kind of explains it, but there's so much if you just search about David Irving and the lawsuit he brought against another historian, and that historian's publisher demonstrates that an interpretation is also about what we choose to be relevant to be studied. So it's not just about, I read this and I interpret this. But what if you don't read other things? That's also the act of interpretation, because you are interpreting what deserves, what merits your attention. Now, this might even be a biased statement by me. How do incorrect statements demonstrate the problems with interpretation? So this is about someone who is basically denying another thing that historians, that the world agrees happen. So learn about Ram Sayer's article, Contracting for Sex in the Pacific War. This article disagrees with the common historical belief, I would just say fact, about comfort women in World War II. If you don't know about that, it's awful. I don't want to talk about it, but it's a really important thing in history. So this article, the one that he wrote, and his methods caused a huge controversy, kind of similar to Holocaust denial. And there is a lot of information to be found about why people think he interpreted correctly. So is it reliable? Can you go too far? What makes it reliable? Maybe these two examples can work together to talk about how it's not just important to think about what we study, but think about what we ignore. I think that this is a really important example, a point for any AOK that you're going to talk about. What if interpretation is the only tool available? There are many times in history where there was no corroborating evidence for a text. So one example is when Roger Casement, an Irish rebel, was portrayed as being homosexual in what became to be called the Black Diaries. So what happened here is somebody who was a rebel, as soon as he died, the British government said, oh yeah, that guy was a homosexual. But there was no other evidence for or against that. So some people claimed that the British government was just trying to smear him. What happened? Go read the article. It's really interesting. So were these diaries, supposedly by him, really his own words? Or were they part of a smear campaign? Look at how historians make the claims that they do. How is the truth and how do we know what we know? Well, you're going to have to read about it, but this is a perfect example of when interpretation is really all we got. Okay, I actually did this. Don't take my quote here because it'd be really bad, but one of the things that you could do pretty easily is create your own human sciences evidence. So a great TOK essay can stand up by having evidence that other essays don't. One way of doing that is to conduct your own research or interview. So talk to your psych teacher and quote them. Or, and this is what I did, I have a friend who's a psychologist, the non-drug ones. Find a family friend who works in that mental health sphere. I did this and my friend gave me two great quotes. So I read her the title and I said, what do you think? And she said, if you're ever thinking, yeah, I'm right, that's when you are most likely wrong. I'm like, oh, I gotta share that with the kids on my channel. And then I said, so is interpretation reliable? She said, it isn't reliable, but it's one of the tools in my belt, which makes it okay that it's not reliable. So if interpretation is used with other things, then it's okay that it's not reliable because it's still extremely useful. Now, when we're talking about economics, interpretation can be very reliable. So economics is often considered the most reliable discipline in the human sciences because it is the most mathematical. There are many examples of when interpreting results in economic studies can be considered. So, one article I found was reliability and validity of behavioral economic measures, a review and synthesis of discounting and demand, blah, blah, blah. That's a lot of words, but look, I got you this entire article here. Use ChatGPT to search it. It's great. Just remember, double check the quotes that it provides you. Ask for the page numbers. So what is this talking about? The knowledge interpreted in the study is reliable because, why? It can be repeated. The knowledge can be demonstrated in other contexts, and it's more quantifiably justified than qualitatively justified. So to what extent is it reliable? If these three things are happening, it's pretty reliable. What causes unreliable interpretations? That's basically what we're asking here. In an article by Vowels called Misspecification and Unreliable Interpretations in Psychology and Social Sciences. These sound so much fun. You can download the whole article right there. Be sure to read the abstract first. The author identifies three main practices that cause interpretation to be unreliable: functional misspecification, structural misspecification, I don't even know what these are, and unreliable interpretations of results. So when we're doing these studies, or when the experts are doing these studies, these are the things that really can cause things to go wrong. And I honestly felt like this was kind of written for us. So again, you're going to open this, you're going to go, what the heck did Get an A in TOK send me? Come on, let's see. All right. And then we're going to download this PDF, throw it in the ChatGPT after we read the abstract here. And then we're going to use this. We're going to quote it. We're going to look at these charts and figure out what it means. But then we're going to understand three ways in which interpretation and using our brain to look at facts and numbers can really get us messed up. One of my favorite examples of all time is prediction the same as interpretation? So if you say that prediction is just the interpretation of statistics, and we could, then we must look at Nate Silver, the most famous statistician really in the world today. But in 2016, he completely screwed up the prediction of the presidential election. So why was that a big deal? Because he got 100% correct when it came to Obama winning. And then he predicted Hillary Clinton. Everyone's like, oh, Hillary Clinton's definitely going to win. And we know what happened. So the most important thing, though, isn't that he lost or that he did things well. The most important part for us is that he talked about what happens and why he got wrong when looking at statistics. So this is amazing. This is an article in the Harvard Gazette interviewing him. There's nothing better than this article. And in this article here explores what human scientists might be getting wrong with statistical models. So again, when we're looking at statistics, numbers, graphs just reporting data, we tend to think that that doesn't require any interpretation at all. Does it or doesn't it? What do you think? The last AOK I'm going to suggest, even though you can do all five, is the natural sciences and a case study in model failure. This fantastically titled article talks about why so many COVID-19 prediction models were incorrect. Now, if you've seen my other stuff, you know that I very often say don't talk about COVID, don't talk about the vaccine. This is not talking about something very common, and this is very relevant. So this is saying when they were making predictions, which would be interpretations, they got it wrong a whole lot. So we're looking at why did they get these wrong, and then how can we relate that to the reliability of interpretation. This next example is one of those times where I learned something completely new. So using real world data or real world examples, which you're supposed to do in your TOK essay, of course, is actually something that isn't extremely common in the natural sciences. So when making public policy, so this could kind of be human sciences as well, models can often be made from data that comes from clinical trials, not what happened with the real people taking these medicines. So this article here demonstrates how it could be useful to use an interpretive model based on real world evidence. So what happens when the public takes a drug rather than other kinds of evidence. So what is happening chemically? What happened to the animals? What happened to the test subjects before this drug got released to the public? This article elaborates even more on real world evidence and how it is used far less than you think. I had no idea about this. So when we think about interpretation, it matters what we are interpreting if we're discussing reliability. So one of the things we can talk about here is how reliable is the real world evidence when compared to the clinical trials. I never knew about this before. So this example prompts us to ask, what are we interpreting when we want to fully address the title? I told you we'd get here again, when interpretation is the only tool available to scientists. So this could be done for any AOK, but similar to my point in history, when making big claims such as the origin of the universe, there is often a lack of empirical data that can justify and prove claims. So we have theories about a lot of stuff, but that required a lot of interpretation of what we know. So instead, as this article about cosmology demonstrates, a lot of interpretation is required in the void of other tools. So that's talking about the ways of knowing. So the philosophy of cosmology, so how do we approach making predictions, making claims about how the universe started and how it expands and how it exists. Here is where it gets really interesting though. What's interesting is that as technology improves, some of these interpretations can be justified. So what used to be interpretation based on we're drawing conclusions, now technology is saying, hey, actually that old interpretation, that was wrong. Or, and this is where it gets really exciting, that interpretation that was made with the void of data, it actually was right. The last example is a classic get an A in TOK example. Interpretation may not be seen as reliable because it's just interpretation. So are we judging interpretation too harshly? This is kind of the opposite of this right here. So a great example is Alfred Wegener, who first proposed continental drift. Yeah, here's the guy right here. What's up, Alfred? It might be Wegener. I don't know. Hey, German people, let me know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. He first proposed continental drift. Unfortunately, he didn't have any hard evidence, and he was German. They discriminated. So he was mostly ignored. What reasons besides unreliability might we say that interpretation is not enough to justify a claim? So research him here. Remember, on Wikipedia, you don't want to quote this, but if you look down here, that's long. Look at how many sources there are in here. A lot of these you can link to and you can read those. You can get ChatGPT to summarize them for you, and they'll really help you out. So this connects to sense perception as well, which is a classic way of knowing. Keep these. Remember to look at the work of historians. Everything is about what a historian did or wrote, and you will do a great job. Remember, hit me up on Fiverr. I can help you out there. We can Zoom. I Zoom with some of you guys every single week. What's up, guys? And I hope that TOK sucks a little bit less than it did at the beginning of this video. I will see you next time.